In the last video, we looked at how liberal ideas could both help make the world a better place or make a mess of things, depending on your perspective. Now let's talk about what it means to be a citizen of a liberal society. There are rights and responsibilities that go with all the freedoms Canadian citizens enjoy. But first, let's talk about what is a citizen. Some see citizenship as a personal attachment to your nation state, like patriotism. You can be a global citizen or a citizen of your town. Others see it merely as a legal definition, with documents to prove you legally belong. Well, let's look at those legal definitions. Some nation-states have different ways of classifying who is a citizen. For example, Canadian and American citizenship is usually based on birth. You automatically get to be a citizen if you're born here. It's known as jus soli, or right of the soil. The issue with this is if a child is born in Canada but the parents aren't Canadian, should the child still have all of the rights and privileges other Canadian citizens have, including protection by the Canadian government, even if the child is no longer living in Canada? There are other nation-states like Greece where citizenship can be based on bloodlines. You're a citizen regardless of where you live because it's based on whether your family has traditionally been a member of that nation. This is called jus sanguinis, or right of blood. The issue with this is there could be people who want to be a member of your nation, but they can't because they don't have the bloodline. For example, in the past, Germany had this policy, and it was very difficult for foreign workers to apply for citizenship. And most countries today will allow immigrants to apply for citizenship. That's called naturalization. Some countries will require a citizen to give up any other allegiances, while here in Canada, you can be a citizen of more than just one country. One issue with this is the idea of dual citizenship. Can you really have a loyalty to more than one nation-state? Many see citizenship as the agreement to be civil or courteous to each other, to serve each other, morally support your fellow man. That could include something as simple as taking responsibility for ensuring your neighborhood stays clean. Your responsibilities can also be seen as your rights. You have the responsibility to respect the law, yet you also have the right to be treated the same as everyone else under the law. You have the right and responsibility to vote. You have the right to dissent and are encouraged to do so in a civil manner. There's many humanitarian issues that need to be addressed in our communities and around the world, and you're encouraged to participate in the political process in order to advocate for yourself and your fellow citizens. You have freedom of speech and assembly in order to do so. For example, we've talked about the lobby group MAD that has the right to pressure the government to implement laws relating to making our roads safer. So while you should follow the law, you can also try to change it. And it doesn't take a large group with a lot of money to make a change. The Pink Shirt campaign just started with small groups of students in Nova Scotia who wanted to stand up to bullies, and now it's practiced across Canada. There are many great examples of citizens dissenting in order to advocate for a better society in both liberal and non-liberal societies. The recent history of Ukraine has shown both the power of a corrupt state and the ability of the people to come together to fight against this. Do some research on the pro-democracy protests and current status of Ukraine to help you understand how this case study fits with the ideas in this unit. Another example we've already talked about in the previous unit was apartheid, where protests both within the country and internationally pressured the illiberal South African government to end their racist policies. Now, this doesn't mean that South Africa is a liberal utopia today. There are still serious issues with race relations, and there are too many scandals of government officials abusing their power. But things are much better for the majority of the population than it was under apartheid due to citizens taking action. And don't forget the anti-war protests. While the protests didn't immediately bring an end to the Vietnam or Iraq wars, the people put pressure on their governments to find a way to get out of the region. Canadians also put pressure on their politicians to keep their promise of ending the offensive or fighting mission in Afghanistan by 2011. But as we've talked about before, are there limits to protests? Many would agree that the anti-gay protest by members of the Westboro Baptist Church at funerals is inappropriate. But what about the two American athletes who won medals at the 1968 Olympics and raised a black-gloved fist to support the Black Power movement? Because the Olympics are supposed to be apolitical, or not political, they were suspended from the team and sent home. While some saw their actions as an offense, others saw it as brave, because this was during the Civil Rights Movement and African Americans were still fighting for equality. Did these American citizens fulfill their responsibilities, or did they take it too far? What's a current protest movement that's taking center stage on social media? Do you have a responsibility to choose a side, to stand up for what you believe in? How do we avoid following in the footsteps of the McCarthy trials where innocent people were caught up in an attempt to make society better? And really, how effective is #activism? What about being willing to fight for your nation state? Is that actually a responsibility? During World War II, Canada had to use conscription to organize enough soldiers to be successful against the fascist powers in Europe and Asia. That obviously took the rights away from those who didn't want to fight. But there were people who were able to avoid being conscripted. For example, pacifists or conscientious objectors can apply to avoid being conscripted because of their beliefs. So how does that fit with the responsibility of a citizen during a time of war? What really impresses me are the people who were willing to fight to protect my freedoms, including the freedom I have to decide I don't want to fight. During World War II, many Aboriginal and Japanese Canadians chose to fight in the war, despite the fact that they didn't have the same rights and freedoms as other Canadians at the time. They were fighting for rights they didn't have. So what do you think are your responsibilities as a citizen of Alberta, of Canada, of the world? How would you get motivated to take action? And how do your answers to these two questions demonstrate your ideology?